last night where Michigan went to Minnesota. Kind of a sleepy Thursday night game. Felt like it a little bit for Michigan. They got up to a big lead in this one. Minnesota in the second half battles back against them, Ken. It was a big comeback for Minnesota. Dawson Garcia went crazy, 27 points. He was nearly unstoppable for the entire game. Minnesota just collectively they were resilient. They were able to draw themselves back into this game, and they've been in a few close games this season. Maryland they were in a close game with. Ohio State they were in a close game with. Really, they should have won that Ohio State game, but the player fouled, only up 2 points, and that was really weird that happened. But I was telling you last night, Kent, as we were watching it, I was like, Michigan's gonna win this game. Like, I know Minnesota has come back, but like, they literally fouled up 2 against Ohio State. Like they're gonna find a way to lose this, and then they go to overtime, and then from there Minnesota sticks with them. Dawson Garcia is the man, hits the buzzer beater shot to give them the win. Kent, what were your thoughts coming out of this? I guess let me ask you this: what impressed you the most with Minnesota, and then give me what concerned you the most with Michigan.
Oh wow. I'll say that the easy answer to what impressed me the most was just Dawson Garcia in general. And Philip is here. We just got done talking about you, Philip.
I think he's actually watching it with his dentist, I bet.
He might be.
He just put it
Tell
on
your
the
dentist
TV.
to subscribe. That'd be nice. No, but Dawson was like impressive like always. It seems like he hasn't had those monster games like he had last night, but he took advantage of everything that Michigan was giving him. And just really impressive play with him. And I'll give an honorable mention to Lakai Patterson. I hope I'm saying his name right. I thought his name was Lucille for a while, the way he spells it, but it's Lakai. And
any name with an apostrophe in it throws me off.
It's really tough. But it felt like, especially down the stretch, he hit some really big shots that either like tied it up or gave Minnesota the lead back.
Mm-hmm.
And like he was really impressive as well. So just the shot making from Minnesota and those two guys specifically had big nights. For Michigan, it's the same concerns, the same two major concerns they've had all year. It's they can't hold on to leads, which they had a 9-point lead at halftime, and they can't stop turning the ball over. When your turnover differential, like we're looking at right here on the screen, is 7, that's 7 extra possessions you're giving a Minnesota team at home that you should be handling in an overtime game. Can't do that. Even if you're just even with the other team, you're giving yourself a chance to win. But when you're giving them 7 extra possessions in a really tight game, you're not going to win many of those games. So obviously, like I said, it's been all year with this. Can't blow the leads, which they did almost instantly in the second half, it felt like. And then you gotta take care of the ball, which they just cannot seem to do for whatever reason. I mean, we know the reasons, but
I was gonna say, to me, I know the reason. I know it's Danny Wolf. The guy, what did he have? 6 turnovers in this game by himself. 6 turnovers. Now he did have 7 assists. So like, it's like pick your poison here with Danny Wolf. Either you don't give him the ball and the offense for Michigan gets stagnant and they're not passing the ball around as much and they're not getting as much movement off the ball, or you give the ball to Danny Wolf, the offense looks great, but Danny Wolf could also turn it over at any point in time. Jeff, it is a green sweatshirt, actually. This was actually just the first thing that was next to my bed this morning. So it's in no way is this me supporting the Michigan State Spartans. But I will say the Michigan State Spartans are undefeated right now.
They are. They're undefeated in the conference.
No, I should wear green until they lose, right? That should be the new thing.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. But thank you for being here, Jeff. Benny YT YouTube says Minnesota best team in the country. They look. Hey, put them in the tournament. 1 seed. You know,
best player in the country for sure. Parker Fox.
Well, yeah,
like we already knew that going into the season, though, so that's not a surprise.
We knew that. Parker Fox last night, 0 points, played 14 minutes, but they were able to get the win anyway. So when your best player scoring 0 points and you're able to get the win, I mean,
he knows when he needs to step up and when he needs to step back. And last night he knew he needed to step back a little bit.
There we go.
That's the greatness of Parker Fox.
It's the selflessness. Yeah.
Yeah.
John says Danny Wolf can stop can't stop turning the ball over in particular. Yeah, no, you are exactly right, Ken. Danny Wolf, I think that's the biggest conundrum for me right now. As I was talking about earlier, like 7 assists, six turnovers. If I'm Dusty May, I don't know what to do here. I do think that things are better when you have Trey Donaldson bringing the ball up the floor. So I think that is something that Dusty May needs to look at more often, because I do think that Danny Wolf gets a little stagnant with the ball when he brings it up, and maybe you run some action to get Danny Wolf open, and then you run the ball screen to him with Vlad Golden. But I mean, the guy is such a playmaker and has such good passing ability that it's hard to really say like, stop giving him the ball, So to me, there has to be a happy medium somewhere, because you can't continue on with these turnovers. And if you do have these turnovers, you have to get turnovers on the defensive end. Like you said, only 6 turnovers for Minnesota in this game. That was impressive for them, especially in an overtime matchup.
Yeah, and I'll just give credit a little. I mean, I guess I'll give a lot of credit to Minnesota for causing the turnovers too. But it's hard to give them a ton of credit, though, because this is a constant thing for Michigan. It's like they're averaging 14 turnovers a game. So, like, you almost expect 13 to be the norm for them. It's just a matter of if they're going to, force turnovers from the other team. And last night they were not able to. So, like I said, credit to Minnesota, good defense. They did what they were supposed to do to cause them, but it's also just what Michigan does at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for
What
sure.
do you think about Ben Johnson? Because I was going back and forth with some people, not really back and forth, but there was a little bit of chatter on Twitter on one of my replies about whether he's a good coach or not. I feel like I've always been in this camp. I think that he's a good coach. He doesn't have the resources that the other 17 teams have, it seems like. So he's really behind the 8 ball. And this was his first top 25 win since he's been at Minnesota. But it does add a little notch on his belt for his resume. Do you still think he's a good coach? Like, do you think he's a good coach? Do you think he should get an opportunity elsewhere? Do you think they should maybe invest a little bit more in the program? Where are you at right now with Ben?
If I'm Minnesota, I'm not moving on from Ben Johnson anytime
Right.
soon.
But if you're him, though.
But yeah, if you're Ben Johnson, isn't he an alumni? Didn't he play there or
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah. So it's hard to move on from your alma mater like that. To me, I think this is just where Ben Johnson is at for at least the foreseeable future. I mean, maybe at some point when he gets older, if they don't change anything, maybe something happens. But if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm sticking around and I'm trying to get as much change as possible, not just for him as a coach, but for the coaches that come after him, because you want to leave your program better than how you found it. Now, obviously, how he found it was not in great shape, investment wise and everything like that. But as far as everything else goes, like he needs to be the one, boots on the ground, getting this change to happen, getting the university to invest more, because he's the one that has been around this university and has established trust within the those who are in charge, the boosters, everything like that. So the best thing for Minnesota is for Ben Johnson to stick around as long as possible. But if they're not changing here in the next 3 or 4 years, if Ben Johnson is dealing with the same stuff year in and year out in 3 or 4 years, it stinks. I don't want it to happen, and I'm sure Ben Johnson wouldn't want it to happen. But if Minnesota doesn't begin to invest, you got to move on, because you got a coaching career to think about.
And the thing that's tough for him, and this is what happened this season for him, is, at least, I don't know, maybe this is just from my perspective. I guess Minnesota fans would have better insight on this. It felt like everyone was coming back at first. Like when the season ended, it was like Pharrell Payne's going to come back. Like Christie might come back. He might stay another year. Like Hawkins all but like said he was for sure coming back.
Yeah, he literally said,
like,
I'm not going to the portal. Yeah.
Yeah, instantly, like he's just, his roster, like his best players are all gone. And he's got to scramble to build a roster. And now he's building it back up. And like you said, if they don't invest, like those guys are going to leave again. So he'll be right back in the same boat next year. It's just a really tough, like, hamster wheel that he'll be on if Minnesota can't figure things out.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Minnesota, the way they are operating, not the way Ben Johnson is operating, because I don't think it's his fault, but the way Minnesota right now is operating, this is a stepping stone program to another program, right? Which is unfortunate. You're in the Big Ten. You're in one of the best conferences in the country. This is consistently a top 3 conference in college basketball. You You can't be that when you're a team in the Big Ten. So, but let's talk a little bit of outlook on the season for Minnesota, Kent. I mean, Minnesota gets this win, maybe a little bit of fire under them. Their numbers are not great. You know, they're outside the top 100 and like KenPom and most other services. I think they're outside it in Torvik as well. I haven't checked back on them recently, but they're outside the top 100, but they've been close. Like I said, Maryland, they were close against. Ohio State, they were close against. Like, does this Minnesota team have something in them to make a run to try and get to the NCAA tournament?
I don't think so. I hate to say it because I was all in on this team last year and like making the push to get to the NCAA tournament, but where they're at right now, they don't have, like, I'm just making sure as I go through. I mean, I don't know why I had to double check this.
They are top 100, 99th. Thanks you, Jeff. That's awesome.
Well, if we're going based off that, they're definitely not making it because 100 teams don't make the NCAA tournament. But
well, that's true.
I think that they're. I just hate. I mean, I'll just be blunt about it. I think they're in a position right now where they're basically trying to play spoiler for some teams that are on the bubble, because they're not going to get enough wins in conference to borderline even make the Big Ten tournament, which is a whole nother problem by itself. By the way, I still want to complain about that, but I still think that they're going to be in that bottom three and not make the Big Ten tournament even, and then the season's over after that. They don't have an opportunity to go win the Big Ten tournament, so that would be their automatic bid to get in. I just don't see it. I mean, with the teams that they have coming up, I see Washington, as I said that 2 weeks ago. I still think that they're going to win the Washington game at home. But other than that, I can't point out another win that I could guarantee you. They're definitely not only going, I feel like they're going to win more than one game the rest of the season, but there's not one that I could point out right now and be like, all right, they're going to check this box, this box, this box, and this box, and then they're going to be in position to like be on the bubble. I just don't see it, man. I don't know.
They have 13 games left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 of those 13 games are quad one games. They have played 7 quad one games so far, which is just crazy. But unfortunately for them, they have only won 1 of their quad one and quad 2 games. They are 1-8 in quad one and quad 2 games, and they are 8-1 in quad 3 and quad 4 games. If you were to tell me that they were like 1-8 in quad 1 games and they were only 0-1 in quad 2 and they were 1-0 in quad 3, I'd say there's a chance. But unfortunately for a team like Minnesota, where you've lost home games, like they're going to be going up against a number of teams on the road. They lost their home game opportunity against Ohio State, against Purdue. Obviously they weren't going to beat Purdue, but still that was a home game opportunity that you had, and they squandered it. Michigan State, they lost that home game opportunity. So as far as I'm concerned, like, could something happen? Of course, this is college basketball, but I don't see it happening. This team would have to go like 6-3 in their final quad 1 games. You're talking about.
I was going to say
9-9.
7. I was going to say 7 wins out of those 9.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just do not forecast that happening.
I
mean, but it's tough to say that after they just beat a team that was undefeated in the conference, but it felt like,
But it wasn't with ease. Nothing
right.
about this happened with ease. This was a tough fought game the entire time, and with how tough the Big Ten is, we'll get to talking about Mick Cronin's comments on that here soon. But with how tough the Big Ten is, that's a tough road.
I'll say something nice to finish with Minnesota.
Okay.
Their last couple of games, so like at Maryland, even in parts of the Wisconsin game, and then obviously the other overtime game that they had, or double overtime game, wasn't it, with Ohio State? They're a team that, if your team is playing them, or if it's a night your team is off, there's not a team in this conference now that is a for sure win. So it's an entertaining game at the very least. They're going to compete in every single game, and they're going to be entertaining for you to watch. That's 100%. The best I can say for them.
100%. All right, let's talk about Michigan really fast one more time. We talked about the turnovers, everything else. I mean, does this concern you for a Big Ten title standpoint for Michigan. Right now, your top four in the Big Ten looks like they're going to be the four contending are Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, and Illinois. Illinois drops one last week to USC. Michigan drops one now to Minnesota. Michigan State will most likely drop one at one point. Penn State Purdue dropped one to Penn State earlier in the season. I mean, it's gotten to the point now where it's kind of like everybody is there. Michigan State's going to drop one at some point. I mean, it just happens in the Big Ten. So, I mean, do you see Michigan coming out on top of the Big Ten? You think they're a top four lock team in the Big Ten? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're a top four lock. I think it's them, Illinois, Michigan State, and Purdue still. I still love Purdue. I got a lot of flack for putting Purdue number 2 in my power rankings, but they won this week. And, that's tough to do. Michigan just proved it. That's tough to keep getting those wins. So, and speaking of, I know we're probably not going to talk about this game, but just real quick on them, same thing. They were down at halftime and they came back and got a win on the road. I know it was Washington, but that's what the great teams are going to do. They're going to put teams away at the end of the game, and Michigan wasn't able to do that last night. But yeah, I still think that they're a top. Those four teams have separated themselves in the conference as the only ones you can really have a conversation about going and winning a Big Ten regular season championship. So, if there was a four-sided coin, I would flip it and say, yes, they absolutely have a chance to win it still, especially only being at one loss. And they got some massive games coming up. If they can go to Purdue and win coming up next week, if they can beat Michigan State in February, those are going to be big wins that'll knock those other teams down behind them, and then they'll be right in position to go win the conference.
Yeah, I think those are your top four. I think the other team that could contend with them is Wisconsin. You and I talked about them during the power ranking episode. They're kind of being looked down upon because of that 3-game stretch. But I don't think we realized that Illinois and Michigan were as good as they are during that stretch. And Marquette also, I think that was the Marquette game that was in there. That was a tough loss as well. But Wisconsin's responded well after those 3 losses. So we'll see what happens. Oregon has fallen off. UCLA, I mean, Oregon's won their last 2, don't get me wrong, but that was against Ohio State and Penn State in very close games. UCLA is just dropping off like crazy. Maryland, we'll talk about them in a second. They just lost to Northwestern, so we'll see what happens. But